Okay, so to start out biology class, you have to know what biology is, right? What are we learning in this lovely class of ours? So, biology is the study of life, and we're going to talk about what does that mean? What is life? What is the definition of life, right? So, but we do study all living things, so that's plants, animals, protists, fungi, and bacteria. And you might want to look those up if you are not really quite familiar with them. And note that I will be using the word organism, which is any living thing. So it's the generic term. And then you can be more specific because they're in a specific kingdom. And so then you could say, oh, it's an animal, it's a plant, it's a fungus. That would be very specific. Organism is just anything. So we do have a domain called eukarya, which are eukaryotes. We're going to be talking about those next unit. Those are cells that have organelles, and there are 4 groups of animals or organisms, that have eukaryotic cells. So animals is the main one that we always think of because we actually fall into that category. I know that sounds harsh, but we are in the animal kingdom because we have very similar characteristics as all the others in that category. Fungi, which are mushrooms, most of you know of, but they also are single-celled organisms like yeast. And we're going to be talking about yeast a lot, so you want to know that that's a type of a fungus. And then protista, which are usually unicellular organisms in the water, but then we also have large plant-like looking organisms like kelp. So you can see that picture here of the kelp. They actually are called protists. They're not plants, but they sure do look and have very similar features as plants. So Plantae is the name of the kingdom for plants, which also are eukaryotes or have eukaryotic cells. And so we'll be studying both, focusing in on plant and animal cells and how plant and animal cells look. But then, of course, we will have bacteria out there. We will refer to bacteria. Bacteria are called prokaryotes, made out of prokaryotic cells. And there are 2 kinds of bacteria. We have archaea, which are very old, ancient types of bacteria. And then we have just bacteria, which is the kind you are familiar with in terms of what's in your body, what could cause an illness. Those are all just basic in the category of bacteria. Okay, so this is what we study, right? That's what biologists study. That's what we're going to be trying to learn about this year. All right, so what we do know is that organisms or living things are highly organized. They have a very special set of organization. And so if we broke it down from the organism, we would break it down and we would find that that organism is made out of organs. Those organs are made out of tissues. Those tissues are made out of cells. Those cells are made out of organelles. Those organelles are made out of chemical molecules. And all of those chemical molecules are made from atoms. And we can't go smaller than an atom for physical existence. There are parts of an atom, but the atom is the smallest thing that retains any sort of physical property that we would use in the world. So the atom is that smallest piece of that organization. So how do we know something's alive? Like, how do I know this plant is alive? I mean, it doesn't move, really. At least I don't see it moving. So a lot of students always tell me movement, right? Movement is a key to being alive, but I wouldn't say that's completely true. It could be true, but that's not an important part. So scientists have been studying biology very carefully for the last 200 years, especially once the invention of a microscope came along. That was when biology really spread its wings and started to grow as a true science of understanding. And so what we did know with the microscope is what we learned is that all living things are made out of cells. And so that was the main characteristic. So if I took a piece of this like wood here, well, actually that wood would work, but if I took a rock and looked at that under the microscope, it's not made out of cells. If I took this glass and looked at it under the microscope, it's not made out of cells. So maybe something that was once alive and is now dead, like this piece of wood, would still show cells. It won't show the rest of it. So having cells and organization is just one piece. The other thing is it has to respond to stimuli. So I turn on the lights in this room. A person like you would probably go, oh, you responded to the stimuli of light. Or you'll walk in my room and you'll say, whoo, it's really hot in here, Miss Daniel. Or, oh, it's freezing in your classroom today, Miss Daniel. That is responding to stimuli because temperature and light and dark organisms respond to it. You might think that this plant does not respond to stimuli, but it does. Do you see I have like a little piece of dead leaf here, and that's because it was really hot the other day, and that part of the plant died from the heat. So it does respond to stimuli. It also grows towards the light. So over time, you would actually see that my plant has changed, has moved. Maybe not like you and I move, but it does move and it responds to stimuli. Another big thing is that all living things have to maintain homeostasis. So the inside has to keep the same usually. It can't really fluctuate too much. So we have to have the same amount of water, the same amount of sugar molecules, the same amount of temperature. So homeostasis has to be maintained in order to be alive. This glassware does not care about homeostasis, right? So there's nothing going on there. Metabolism, it uses energy. So a lot of people use this word as, oh, it has to eat. But eating is kind of like an animal thing that we have a mouth and we chew and we eat. But this plant has metabolism. This plant is absorbing nutrients from the soil. It's getting water from the soil. It's getting light from the sun. And it is using those things to make ATP, which is energy. So, and it needs that energy to be alive. And so all organisms have to make ATP and use energy somehow. Growth and development, all organisms grow, maybe not a lot, but do grow, develop, and then honestly, eventually die. Like that's kind of part of being alive is that there's also death. Again, this glass, it's not growing, it's not developing, it's not living, it's not dead, right? It's just glass. Reproduction, all living things reproduce, which means that it's going to make a copy of itself somehow. Maybe not an exact copy, but partial copy, right? Like we are humans, we are 50-50, mom and dad. So you could be a partial copy to cause reproduction. A lot of organisms actually just copy their cells exactly or their self exactly, and then they have the exact same offspring. And then changing over time. So like I said, we have a lifespan. So we kind of change over time. There's that beginning, there's that middle, and there's that end to your life. So we all organisms somehow change with time. So that is how we know organisms are alive, right? And that this glass is not alive. To be alive, you must have all of those characteristics, not just one. So a car might have one of those characteristics, or this glass you might think has one of those characteristics, but it doesn't have all of them. And so to be alive, you have to have all of those characteristics in order to be studied in biology. Okay. And then I always like to show plants because a lot of students, I know you do see plants grow over time, right? This plant has been growing. It's getting bigger. It's developing its first rose. But plants do respond to stimuli actually faster than you think, especially it depends on the plant. So you've seen a Venus flytrap that will respond to the fly landing inside, boom, closing. And this one's kind of cool too because it responds to being touched, which is kind of unusual. Oops, I need to fix that. Which is kind of unusual for this situation, right? So let's see if I can get this to play for me. Nope. difficulties. Welcome to my classroom. All right, so you get the idea. All right, so that is biology. First part, what is biology? See you on the next note slide.